Hello and welcome to Clean Talk. I'm your host, Brad Whitchurch. It's Wednesday, August 31st at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and that means we're coming to you live. Very excited about our guest today on Clean Talk. He's a leadership guru. I'm very fortunate that he was my first manager in my first career out of college more than 30 years ago. He's my mentor, and I'm proud to call him my friend. Please welcome to the show, my good friend, Mr. Greg Banning. Greg, welcome to Clean Talk.
Thanks so much, Brad. I'm really happy to be here. And it just goes to show if I was able to survive you, we can all survive a lot. So
okay, it's going to be that kind of show. I got it. Okay. Well, I appreciate you being here, Greg. I really do. And maybe for our audience, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and from your perspective, why you're on Clean Talk today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in leadership for going on 30 years now. When you invited me to come on board here and talk about leadership and really how it relates to the whole pandemic and COVID and what we've been going through over the past 2.5 years, and really the new norm that we're in, that was exciting to me, and I want to jump in and do that. My leadership career has taken me across industries, so from retail to manufacturing, distribution, software. And I've done it, throughout the North America and down in Costa Rica internationally for 5 years. So, it's given me I think a perspective, worldwide or kind of global perspective. And what I found is, great leadership, effective leadership. There's commonality throughout leadership. And while you might adjust it for cultural aspects, it remains pretty steady. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm married, 3 kids, and love wine and working out. I'm not sure how those go together, but they do. And that's about it.
Well, I know you want us to get the camera angle to show your guns. I'm sorry we couldn't make that happen for you. But, look, I look at you as a leadership guru, and really we all are involved in some form of leadership, whether it's in our organizations or our family or in our communities. How would you describe your leadership philosophy?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, Brad. We're all, leaders at some point in the day in our lives. For me, it's leadership's all about, serving those that have been entrusted to your care, as a leader. And, to kind of support that, if you will, I really lead by 7 principles is the foundation to leadership, in my opinion. The number 1 is you need your people more than they need you. And that's a little backwards for, I think, a lot of folks, or what I might call old school leadership. But getting that first principle, really embedded in your leadership DNA is, I think, key to really having that impact on people, really serving the people entrusted to your care. At the end of the day, I think what we all want to do is we want to create an environment as leaders where people can come and do the best work of their lives, and really feel valued. The second principle is, as a leader, you're not normal. If you got into leadership, if you were elevated into leadership, it's probably because you were super hardworking, you had a lot of grit, a lot of ownership, you had a lot of things that were above and beyond and raised the bar that got you into that leadership position. And you can't go in and lead people as, with the expectations that they're you. You have to lead people on their terms. And that might sound odd to some people, but that all goes into the relationship building of things. The third principle for me is, people do things for their reasons, not yours. And I think, especially I see this in first-time leaders, and actually this is pretty common that I see across the board for, founders and even CEOs of various size companies. They believe people should be doing things for their reasons or the company's reasons. And you really have to answer the question, the why for the people. The fourth principle is people don't do dumb things on purpose. And you've heard me say this a lot. Nobody shows up to be a zero. Everybody wants to be a hero. And listen, if you've got somebody that's not getting a job done, or, I shared with you yesterday, and a very upset customer I had, executive I had to handle for a customer of ours yesterday. And listen, the seller that was involved didn't do something dumb on purpose. They didn't screw up on purpose. And we approached it from that that perspective, right? We have we assume positive intentions always. Number 5 is coach behavior, not style. And that's key because, listen, when you make it personal with folks, especially when you're trying to develop folks, you got to coach the behaviors and not attack the person personally. And then, Brad, I'm sure you're familiar with the golden rule. Are you familiar with the platinum rule?
I'm not familiar with the platinum rule. Enlighten me, please.
All right. Okay. Principle number 6 is, follow the platinum rule. And the platinum rule is simply, treat others the way they want to be treated. So that's kind of like the next elevation. That's Stephen Covey. And I couldn't agree more, especially in today's leadership and effective leadership. And then number 7, listen, you got to remember as a leader, you're always on stage. Leadership is one of the toughest, yet one of the most rewarding professions, I believe, in the world. And listen, the valleys are deep, desperate, lonely for sure. But listen, the highs, when you impact individuals' lives, when you do create a work environment, people can do the best work of their lives. When you're on a journey to leave this legacy as a leader, you have to keep in mind you're always on stage. The folks that you lead are always watching you. They're analyzing you, and they're dissecting everything that you're doing. So those are the 7 principles of leadership that, I try to keep top of mind on a regular basis. And that I think support I'm here to serve, those that have been put in my care. Long-winded answer to your first question. So I don't know, do you have 3 hours?
I was going to say, I think that is great stuff. And I would love to spend the entire time breaking down each of those 7 items. I think we're going to have a call afterwards so I can get all the real details. But we are an infection control podcast, and we want to talk about how leadership is changing or evolving, or how it needs to change and evolve in this pandemic world that we live in. But before we get into that, Greg, I've known you for a very long time. And one of the things I've always respected the most about you is your continual commitment to self-improvement. And I don't think I know anyone who's read more books, absorbed more podcasts and TED Talks on leadership and relevant business strategy than you. The question I've always wanted to ask you is, how do you motivate yourself? You're a master motivator, but how do you inspire yourself to wake up every day and have the energy to make yourself better? Is there a protein drink I can drink every morning that'll give me your energy? What's the secret?
Well, I think it's a number of things, but it's getting what I call a fast start, positive start to every day. It's about discipline. It truly is about routine and being committed. That's where the discipline comes from, is being committed to being consistent with those positive items. I think you got to, whatever your why is, you have to really, I think embody that and, create the type of environment, life habits, discipline that are going to support that why, those dreams. For me, it's really basic stuff, right? I mean, I wake up early every morning, including the weekends, and that's not just because I have a 2.5-year-old. She slept until 8 this morning, but I typically get up at 5 a.m. Sometimes 5:30. But the first thing I do is I lie in bed for 5 minutes and just have gratitude. All the things I'm grateful for. I think it's easy to get spun up, especially the past 2 years or so, with all the I think issues and challenges and heartbreak that COVID and the pandemic has had. It's pretty easy to to not pay attention to those things that we should be grateful for. And there's a lot for all of us to be grateful for. We all have our challenges, but I think starting off the day and just taking 5 minutes and lying there quietly and just thanking, the universe, and really be taking in everything you're grateful for. And then, I think, jumping out of bed and I meditate every single day. So I do insight meditation, and those that aren't familiar with meditation can start with transcendental meditation. That's probably the best way to go. But that's really all just about calming the mind and focusing and really visualizing It's all about mindset. You want a growth mindset, and that starts with you being able to control your mind and keep that positive outlook on things. And for me, a big part of that, and I've done it now for over 25 years, is meditating every single morning. And I could go on and on. I think making the bed, it sounds simple, but I try to do a couple simple tasks in the morning that I think sets the day up in motion for
quick wins.
Yeah, quick wins throughout the day. So I think, that's it. I try to practice. I never want to be that person that's promoting, directing, telling, marketing, certain things, principles, a way of life, whatever it might be. And then I'm doing something the complete, opposite. I've never wanted to do that. So.
Well, I've struggled with meditation, and I've tried because of your recommendations, and I have so much respect for you, and I'm trying to figure out the secrets and emulate them. But I can't make my mind be quiet. But I am all bought in on gratification and being grateful, and the science is out now. It produces endorphins, right? I mean, that it is a chemical scientific process, and what a great way to start the day by counting our blessings. We're all so fortunate. So I love that. Greg, I've got to ask you, I know that you have a lot of experience with companies you've worked for, companies you've consulted for. I'm very excited that you've engaged with Seal Shield and are helping us out on some projects. You've seen a lot of companies. Have you seen some common challenges or maybe common mistakes and that you see over and over again, that are kind of core to many leaders? And if so, what are they and what are the solutions?
Sure. I think the movie Bad Bosses kind of sums it up, but
horrible bosses.
Horrible bosses. There it is. Let's talk just statistically for a moment, right? And this is before the pandemic, and I have not seen a report since the pandemic, but 3 out of every 4 employees report that their boss is the worst and most stressful part of their job. Think about that. 3 out of 4. And then you've got 65% of employees, pre-pandemic, that say they would take a new boss over a pay raise. I mean, those are huge percentages. So you then have to ask yourself the question, why? Why is that? And so I think to get back to your, to your question, first and foremost, the biggest mistake I see is it comes back to some of the principles that I mentioned, right? You're always on stage. You cannot afford to be as a boss. And I don't care if you're the CEO of, Microsoft or, Amazon, all the way down to, maybe your own business where you've got 2 employees. And then someplace in between. You cannot afford to be emotional, and even further to that, inconsistent with your emotions. And let me say this: if you're one moment you're on a high and you're energized and happy and good mood and positive, and then the very next you're banging things, throwing things in your office, and you're just up and down and all over, what you do is create anxiety for your organization and for your people. You'd actually be better off just being angry and yelling consistently, because at least that consistency will give them some realm of consistent basis or consistent behavior. So that's number one that I see.
So eliminate the manic behavior.
Yeah, I think it's intrinsic for a lot of leaders, and most leaders just think I'm the boss. So I'm allowed to lose my temper. I'm allowed to not be in control of my emotions. And I don't think a lot of times it's conscious. I think it's, subconscious entitlement, quite frankly. I think that I see this a lot, not that I see this a lot, that, I'm the boss, my way or the highway. That's a very blunt way of saying what a lot of leaders that I see, they're not CSI enough. They're not inquisitive enough. They're not asking enough why questions. They're not pulling back the layers. They're making assumptions. They're taking things personally. In most cases, and they're reacting rather than responding. And then, I'd say a third big one that I see is that I see leaders trying to control so many things, and I would say that they operate from a set mind, versus a growth mindset. And what I mean by that is they're trying to control their entire universe when really they only control three things. They control their mindset, right? So how they're viewing the world, how they're looking at things, and they control their responses and their actions. And that's it. And I think what they try to do is they believe because of the boss, they can actually control other people. What ends up happening is they manipulate people, or at least try to manipulate people. And so I think those are the top three most common, I think, mistakes that leaders make.
And that's universal, right? That's you have experience domestically, you have experience internationally. These are common things that extend beyond borders. Am I right?
Yep, and it can be dialed up a little bit or dialed down a little bit depending on the culture. So it's dialed down. I'd say if you use the US as a baseline, it gets dialed down a little bit if you go up to Canada, and it gets dialed up a little bit if you go down to Latin America for the most part.
And is the solution just greater self-awareness? How do we solve this problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's where leadership should be and where it's going. And I mean, I think Simon Sinek has built a very successful career over the past 5 years based off this. But it's about ego-free leadership. It's about being authentic and about being transparent, and not being trying to be this something greater or better than life and everybody else that you're supposed to be serving. They're not there to serve you. And so I think the biggest challenge of any leader is to realize, your ego's not you. And if you want to lead successfully and you want to leave a leadership legacy, then you've got to put the ego to the side. It's like Colin Powell said, right? Once your title goes, does your ego go with it? Does everything go with it? And so that's a good barometer, I think.
Well, I think that's great input, great advice, something for all leaders to watch out for. But how has the pandemic, we're an infection control podcast, how has the pandemic affected some of these issues that leaders face today? And what do you have to do different today to address things like you're talking about in terms of ego management and checking the manic style, reflecting that you're always in the spotlight? Maybe the spotlight isn't shining on you in person anymore, it's shining on you virtually. What additional challenges are you seeing in your work as a result of the pandemic for leaders?
Yeah, what COVID and pandemic did, right, is it really magnified everything. So if you were a horrible bad boss before, like, that got magnified, like, make no mistake about it, because if you weren't able to connect with people and build these valued, trusted relationships with your employees, without the pandemic, when you were, interacting with them, face to face on a regular basis, now you're virtual. And so that only magnified that. If you were what I'd say a servient leader, right? If you were ego-free kind of leader, like what Simon Sinek, I think, does a great job of dissecting. John Maxwell started, but Simon Sinek, then that got magnified. What the pandemic did is, right, it made everything virtual. We're just getting back to the offices, and that's not even in whole. People got used to working from home. And so, they expect to have flex hours and flex work times and spend a portion of time working from home. And that's the byproduct of the pandemic COVID. We all had to get great at Zoom, right? We all had to figure out where the mute button was. And
we're still trying to figure that out. Some of us, yeah.
and the lighting, right? All of those kind of things, became a challenge now. So how do you build those relationships, those trusted relationships, and how do you now influence folks? And so I always say to people, to leaders, I go, listen, there's the ROI of leadership, and in the finance world, right, that's return on investment. For leadership, right, that's relationships, outcomes, and influence. And so how do you do that now in a virtual world? And so if you look at an impact organizations and the biggest impact that leaders can have, it's percentage wise, when you look at the surveys out there, relationship quality is number one for employees with their leader. Do you have my best interest at heart? And number two, right behind that, is trusted. Can I trust you? To put me in a position to win, basically. And then lastly, do you know what you're doing? And people are constantly asking this. And so if you think about a virtual world, what the pandemic's caused now, so that makes it that much more difficult because you're not having this face-to-face interaction. Now everything's virtual. So The first thing that I would say that the successful leaders in companies did is they doubled down on the basics early on, and doubled down on the basics, right, of just like running a sound business, but especially being an effective and impactful leader is communication, right? So that's written communication, that's, virtual video, et cetera. It's expectations, and not only setting very clear expectations that we all should be doing, but revisiting those and fine tuning those on a regular basis. Time management, it became very, very clear. That's what I'm saying, magnified the issues. Time management really got magnified in a very, very big way. You've got a lot of employees and individuals, including leaders, that were now sent to home to work from home. And it really became evident that there was a lack in this time management, prioritization, and organization. So again, the great leaders, the leaders I think that successfully got through this, the businesses, and success could be relative in that kind of an environment, but realized time management was an area they needed to quickly get a hold of. One of the things we did for our sellers right out of the gate, we also did this for our frontline leaders, is we built these time blocks. And so we set the expectations, and then we defined the most important things and things that our sellers should be working on and how long they should be working on those. Plenty of flexibility of when they did those things. But in essence, this is where you want to be spending your time. These are the priorities, presentation skills, and those kind of things as well.
Well, as of the time of this show, we are not under a quarantine here in the US, and yet we still have things that have persisted and changed our workplace. You mentioned work from home. I know you're a fan of Elon Musk, as I am. We've all heard him say that, you can come back to work or you can go not work somewhere else. You have a different philosophy. Am I right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's right. We all know this. We say it, but I don't know how many of us really believe it. The one constant in life is change. And so, listen, comfort zones are where dreams go to die. It's really easy, especially in a leadership position, to get into a comfort zone. And then when you do that, right, you want to resist change. And, the world's changing. And what happened with the pandemic, I mean, just look at, the digital world, that advanced the digital world by 10 years. Look at what it's done now for, medicine and disease control and all of that. Correct. And so, it'd be ludicrous to think that once the pandemic, whatever you want to say, has ended or is ending or wherever it is right now, right? There's not going back to the norm. There's the new norm that's now being defined. And I promise everybody that, if you want to attract and retain and grow best talent out there, then you've got to be in tune to what's happening in the marketplace and what people need and the kind of environment that they need to do the best work of their lives. Again, let's go back to nobody shows up to be a zero. Everybody wants to be a hero. So it's all addressing the how and the why, but understanding from their vantage point, not from your vantage point as a leader.
Well, there's a lot of great stuff there. Is there something you can summarize for our audience that now that we have this new norm, what are the things that leaders should be focusing on to help them evolve, to adjust to this new norm and get ahead of the curve moving forward?
Sure. I don't think, listen, you got to have a communication strategy, and there's a lot of sub things underneath there around, recognition, around direction, being informed, knowledge. We basically have, 4 pillars that we work off of in our communication strategy, right? And so it should motivate, it should recognize, it should inform, and then it should direct. And direct is all about the prioritization and expectations of the role, et cetera. All that are underpinnings to, having people feel valued. And, you could do that in a virtual world. It's not, what doesn't work anymore, and I don't care what generation we're talking about, what doesn't work anymore is to stand over somebody's shoulders, not trust them, and micromanage them. That is a formula for absolute failure today. You have to trust that people want to do the best work of their life. You have to trust that, people will lean in and figure it out if you allow them to. Now, they're going to fail sometimes, and that's okay. That's where the learnings come from. And you have to support those failures, and you have to be willing to let them fail. And the thing that I do, like about what's happening in advancing things is it's challenging leaders to get out of that comfort zone, to put their ego to the side, to get more creative, right? And to amp up the things that are important, like their presentation skills, like their communication skills, to build the relationships that you need to run a successful organization.
You mentioned the generational piece, and I got to tell you, Greg, lately sometimes I've been feeling like I'm becoming my grandfather. Is it just me, or is there something to this generational difference within the workforce today? Is that real?
Yeah. So listen, it's real. There's every generation is different. Here's the research. What research shows, and the baby boomers might be blown away by this, but there is, if you go back and look at what was written about the baby boomers way back, there you'll see, if you didn't know you were reading about the baby boomers, you'd think you were reading about the millennials, believe it or not. So a lot of things are how millennials are characterized were a lot of the same adjectives and characterizations that went on with the baby boomers. So, listen, I think the essence of things, it's the same across the board, right? People want to do their best work. And I sound like a broken record. People want to be valued. They want to feel safe and secure. Now, how they want that delivered, the guardrails that they want in place, that definitely could be different. And I don't know if it's so much generational as it is, your kind of walk through life, for sure. Clearly that, I'd say Gen Z and the millennials, especially the earlier millennials, there's definitely distractions, right? There's pings and there's dings, and everybody's reacting to life rather than, positively, in a disciplined manner, focused and leading in with purpose, I think. And I think as leaders, we've got to understand that and help them through that.
Well, I want to see if you can share some resources with our audience. I know you've given me an extensive list of reading material, which I probably can't complete in my lifetime. So is there one book that every leader should read today? Asking for a friend.
Wow, if there's just one book, I think got to set the foundation with John Maxwell. The five essential leadership levels. You'd have to start with that, and then I think from there he's got a plethora of stuff material out there. But after that, then I think you'd go on into Simon Sinek. Leaders eat last, and I think if you had only two leadership books to read, I think if you read John Maxwell's first and then Simon's second, I think that give you an excellent foundation. Then from there you go off and there's a lot of other great resources out there. I will say this, that Ryan Holiday writes a lot of great things from, kind of a philosophical, but from great leaders in history, which I think, is a great complement to some of the, leadership books out in the marketplace today, as you speak about the various generations and leading virtually in these kind of things. It's kind of some of the glue that'll make a lot of that stuff work.
And along those same lines, is there maybe one tip or a couple of tips specific to this new norm that leaders should be focused on if they want to focus on one thing that addresses the changes we've all experienced in society and in our workplace? What's the one thing we should be thinking about to address these changes?
I wouldn't assume anything. I'd ask questions. It'd be really, especially in this environment, to make assumptions, even as well-intended as positive as they might be, because we are in a more of a virtual world. That would, I think, be the biggest mistake you could make right now, is making assumptions. Instead, be that detective and I think ask a lot of questions, and that'll help ignite your growth mindset and the creativity within.
Well, we all know what assumptions make out of you and me. What about predictions for the future? We've had so much change in such a short period of time. Where do you see things going?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very fluid. I think, when we talk about the new norm, if you think something like that's going to land in the next 6 months, and now you've got your new norm and it's predictable and you're good to go for another 5 years or so, good luck with that. It's going to be very fluid times for sure. You're going to see, virtual tools and resources and those kind of things, and the whole digital world really on steroids. And, if you embrace those kind of things, I think it will really, you'll be able to be the benefactor of them. If you resist them, you're going to have a really, really hard time.
Change is the only constant. Our guest today has been Greg Banning. Greg, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. It's been a real joy for me. I treasure our friendship. I value your counsel. And if people want to find out more, Greg, or would like to pick your brain or get some consulting services from you, what do they do?
I just look me up on LinkedIn. So just Gregory Banning on LinkedIn and send me a message, and I'm happy to respond to you, whatever it might be.
Fantastic. Gregory Banning on LinkedIn. Thank you all for joining us today on another episode of Clean Talk. Be sure to join us next Wednesday for another live episode from the Seal Shield Studios. And until then, I'm your host, Brad Whitchurch. For my guest, Greg Banning, reminding you to keep it clean.